Hello and welcome to my Yu-Gi-Oh channel. So today, as the title says, we will be looking at how the new field will be adapted for pendulums. This is going to be Theory 2, so you might want to watch Theory 1 first, about the traditional format of pendulums, and in this case we will be bringing you a look at what the current requirements for pendulum cards exist as they are today. Theory 2, the introduction of the extra monster zone. For anyone who doesn't know, when the latest Master Rules came out, they introduced an extra monster zone. This is a space which means extra monsters must now be summoned to those zones, enabling you to only have one monster from the extra deck at that point. But if you have link monsters, you have to have link points, of course. We won't be getting that probably until next year, most likely September 2022. The idea is that any pendulum monsters summoned from the extra deck have to go to the extra monster zone instead of the main monster zone. You can, of course, still play pendulum monsters from your hand to the main monster zones. It just limits the ones that have already been used and destroyed. And what will need to be changed? The introduction of a new extra monster zone for you and your opponent may need to indicate if a pendulum monster has come from the extra deck, that it must go to the extra monster zone. Additional use of software to recognize pendulum monsters, alongside understanding differences between their pendulum and monster effects. Scales will need to be highlighted so both players are aware of the scales players can special summon with. Unique pendulum animation to help get both players excited for the new summoning mechanic, and the ability to have pendulum monsters face up in the extra deck when destroyed or sent there by other effects. The benefits of this system would avoid misuse of resources. Pendulum players will need to make more strategic decisions to avoid limiting their pendulum monsters to focus on only the extra monster zone for their summons. Basically what that means is if they've already pendulum summoned a load of monsters and they end up getting wiped out by things such as Radiant Mirror Force, then that's their fault, because actually if they just summon things casually, they can't get those resources as quickly back because their extra monster zone only has space for one extra monster. It would also mean that they couldn't really run too many fusion, synchros or exceeds monsters in case they have to rely so heavily on their pendulum effect monsters. The addition of one more monster zone lets you go into different monsters more easily and will be a welcome addition for when Yu-Gi-Oh! Link monsters get introduced probably in September 2022. And lastly, pendulums have restrictions on themselves. For example, some can only work for certain types of decks, such as with despots they can only pendulum summon other despot monsters, or they can alter their scales if the monsters are being pendulum summoned being different to what they're declared to be intended to play with. Now, as for the problems, introducing extra monster zones will prevent the use of multiple extra monster zones, making certain decks such as elemental heroes far less viable, until of course the release of the link monsters, which was a major mitigation to that, but that happened when Vrains began and started. There's a risk that making the mechanic overcomplicated, something that Duel Links has intended to push away from and tried to fix, may off-put some of the new users or younger audiences. And unlike Theory 1, this provides significant consequences for players playing the pendulum monsters, and should instead try and nerf pendulums by limiting their summons rather than where they can be summoned from. Overall, Theory 2 makes it more difficult for an extra deck monster to be used and limits the ability of pendulums to reoccur once they have been destroyed by battle or card effect when they are put back in the extra deck, since they are considered extra deck monsters. I also don't think this is necessarily advisable, because this will go completely the opposite way of Theory 1, whereas this just makes pendulum monsters to be a joke. What do you guys think of this theory? Is this something you consider running? Do you think actually this is likely to be the case of what they're going to do? Or do you think actually this is also far-fetched, and do you think there might be another thing that they can do? If you do have any suggestions, put those in the comments down below. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe for more daily Yu-Gi-Oh! Content.